Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore, and welcome to this edition of the Hudson Report. Now joining us is Michael Hudson. Michael is a distinguished research professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. His two newest books are The Bubble and Beyond and Finance, Capitalism, and Its Discontents. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
Thank you, Jessica.
So, Michael, this week we're going to be talking about the very popular book by French economist Thomas Picketty. It's a 700-page book that takes on the topic of income inequality. Why do you think so many people are talking about this book? What's in it that has people buzzing?
Statistics. It shows that wealth inequality is actually much wider than income equality. Because if you earn income, you have to pay taxes on it. And rich people, the 1%, don't like to pay taxes. So they basically expense most of their income. They expense it as interest, they expense it as depreciation. There are all sorts of expenses. But he shows statistically in almost every country, not only that income and wealth are getting wider and wider apart, the 1% versus the rest of the economy. But it's not just the 10% of the population that's richer than the bottom half or the bottom 20%. It's the 1% that has the vast majority of the wealth and controls the world's stock markets and the bond markets. And since 1980, there's been quite a turnaround. And the 1% have bought government as if government were sort of like a factory that you can make profits on. And you can get much more profits by buying a government than you can ever get by buying a property or real estate. And so what we've been turning into is an oligarchy. Well, a lot of people saw this, but what Piketty did was show that in every country since 1980, since Reagan and Margaret Thatcher had the whole neoliberal revolution, the revolution that's now being supported by the US government, by the Eurozone, by the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, that all of this neoliberalism and so-called free markets is really just a property grab by the rich. And he shows that given this grab, you're not going to be able to get more equality as long as all of this wealth that's accumulating at the very top among the 1% is inherited and passed down and grows and grows. And so basically, he's described the symptoms of what's wrong. And people are very glad that at least he's described the symptoms that everybody knew, but nobody had spent the 3 or 4 years that it took to make all of the charts that he's made.
So it also sounds like he's focused on the 1% specifically. What about the 99%? What do you think is missing in Piketty's argument?
Well, the 1% have got rich by holding the 99% in debt. Basically, you have an economy where governments and businesses, homeowners, credit card users, and people getting an education all have to run into student debt, mortgage debt, credit card debt, government debt, corporate debt, all to the 1%. So the 1% wouldn't be making all of this income and concentrating all this wealth if they didn't hold the bottom 99% in debt to itself. So you have a polarity. You wouldn't have the 1% getting rich if it wasn't in an exploitative way, making the 99% more dependent on them. Now, if the 1% made their money, they call themselves job creators as if they're creating the prosperity, but they're not creating the prosperity because what they're getting is interest and economic rent much more than profits. They're getting rich in an exploitative way, not in a productive way that helps the economy grow and raises living standards.
What are some of the solutions that Piketty proposes?
Well, the first solution he proposes is that people are, all this wealth at the top is being inherited. And since the Reagan and Thatcher revolution, they've got rid of inheritance tax. The 1% says, think of the small families that want to give a little bit of property to their children. Let's not tax them. And by the way, let's make us completely tax free for all of our billions of dollars, just so the middle class families can maybe end up with their house or so. So they've hidden behind the middle class to really abolish the effective inheritance tax. And so this wealth is being inherited to grow and grow. So the first thing he wants is an inheritance tax. The second thing he wants is more problematic. He said, well, maybe there can be a world tax on wealth because, after all, the rich people, families in America hold their money offshore or in Swiss banks or in the Caribbean. So he wants a general wealth tax. And that's what he's been criticized for because he hasn't really gone to the root of what is creating this polarization.
And also, how would you even implement something like that, Michael?
Well, it's very that's why the neoliberals love Piketty. It's why Krugman loves Piketty and others. You can't implement it. So he's produced a book without any solution, and the free enterprise boys like that. The 1% don't mind being criticized as long as there's no solution to their problem, and that's what the critics have come out saying. Wait a minute, there are a lot of solutions. For one thing, some kind of wealth is better than others. You don't want to tax people building factories and improving living standards like the 1% pretend that they do. But what you do want to tax is unearned income, economic rent, capital gains. Right now, the capital gains tax, most people, rich people, make their money not by earning income, they make it on capital gains, on stock markets going up, on bond prices going up, on all of the asset prices that the Federal Reserve's qualitative easing has been uh, just flooding the market with. So the first thing to do is to raise the capital gains rates much higher, closer to 100%. Because that's unearned. These are inflationary gains. Right now, the economy is all about capital gains. So if you make $1 million, like as Warren Buffett said, he makes hundreds of millions of dollars. He pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. So the tax system is all wrong. What Piketty does not suggest is getting rid of regressive taxes like the FICA wage withholding that everybody has to pay. That's now more than 15% of their paycheck. This is a regressive tax. That should be gotten rid of. But most of all, he doesn't talk about the whole restructuring that's part and parcel of this neoliberal revolution, the privatization. He doesn't criticize privatization, and most of this increased wealth by the 1% since 1980 has all taken a result of privatizing the public domain, public utilities, things that 100 years ago everybody expected banking to be a public utility, roads, railroads, public transport, telephone systems, broadcasting systems. Now that these are being monopolized, the rich are getting their money by monopoly rents. And the solution isn't simply to let the rich exploit the 99% by raising the prices you pay for your cable, for bridges, for transportation. It's to deprivatize these assets, to put them back in the public domain so that you can provide basic services to people at a very low price instead of at an extortionate price that's all meant to pay the 1% that basically has been foreclosing on governments and grabbing the public domain. And Piketty quotes the French novelists in English of the 19th century and points out, why is it that novelists understand the problem that's happening in the economy more than economists? Economists all talk about the economy becoming more equal. But if you read Balzac, he said that the origin of almost every great family fortune is a great theft, often undiscovered, and people think it's just a part of nature. And it's thievery and theft, as Bill Black, who's often on your show, also points out every week. You have essentially the decriminalization of fraud, and what really pays is crime, and it's the criminals that have risen most rapidly into the 1%. It's the Wall Street bankers who've been doing the junk mortgages and engaging in the kind of fraud that we've been hearing about on Wall Street. This is not what Piketty discusses. He doesn't say throw the crooks in jail. He doesn't say have government regulatory agencies to prevent this kind of exploitation. He doesn't say reimpose anti-monopoly regulations to prevent monopoly profits from enriching the 1%. He doesn't say take all of these these public utilities that Margaret Thatcher privatized in England and Ronald Reagan did in America and put them back in the public domain so that they can provide basic services to people at cost. All of this is a different topic from his book.
All
So as
right, Michael Hudson, thank you so much for joining us on The Real News.
Okay.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.